First Contact and Revelation. Commander Elena Rodriguez stood at the bridge of the TSS Artemis, Earth's most advanced stealth vessel, watching the massive alien fleet emerge from hyperspace at the edge of the Kuiper Belt. Their arrival wasn't a surprise. Humanity had been preparing for this moment for 43 years. Multiple signatures detected, Lieutenant Park announced from his sensor station, matching known hegemony configurations. 317 vessels, primarily battle cruisers and support craft. Elena nodded, her augmented eyes tracking the holographic display as it mapped the invasion fleet's formation. The hegemony ships arranged themselves in their characteristic spear pattern, a formation they used to conquer 1,000 worlds across the galaxy. Their arrogance was almost palpable. Status of the quantum web? Elena asked, her voice steady despite the weight of the moment. Fully operational, Commander, Dr. Maya Patel responded from her station. All 36 nodes are synchronized and ready. The hegemony fleet remains unaware of our presence or our capabilities. Humanity's greatest advantage wasn't their technology, it was knowledge. In 2082, a research team drilling through Europa's ice discovered the remains of an alien observation post. Within its databases lay detailed records of the hegemony's systematic conquest of the galaxy, including their tactical doctrines, technological capabilities, and most importantly, their weaknesses. The discovery had changed everything. While the hegemony believed they were approaching another primitive civilization, ripe for conquest, humanity had spent 4 decades preparing an intricate trap. The quantum web was just one component of a much larger strategy. They're broadcasting, Park announced. Standard First Contact Protocol. The main view screen activated, revealing a towering figure with iridescent scales and multiple sets of eyes. High Marshal Vexthar of the hegemony spoke in perfectly translated English, their voice resonating with artificial authority. People of Earth, rejoice. Your civilization has been chosen for ascension into the eternal hegemony. Your technological achievement of faster-than-light travel has qualified you for integration. Resistance is unnecessary and would only lead to suffering. You have 24 hours to submit your formal acceptance. Elena exchanged glances with her bridge crew. The message was exactly as the Europa archives had predicted, down to the specific wording. The hegemony hadn't changed their approach in over 10,000 years. They'd never needed to, until now. Send our response, Elena ordered. Text only. As planned. The message was brief. To the hegemony fleet. Your arrival was expected. We decline integration. You have 12 hours to withdraw from the Sol system. This is our only warning. The bridge crew maintained their composure, but Elena could sense their tension. Everything hinged on the next few moments. The hegemony had never encountered a civilization that didn't either immediately submit or attempt conventional military resistance. Their response to this unprecedented situation would determine how the carefully orchestrated trap would unfold. Multiple power signatures detecting across their fleet, Park reported. They're charging weapons systems. Right on schedule, Elena murmured. She opened a secure channel to all Earth Defense Force vessels hidden throughout the system. All units, this is Commander Rodriguez. Operation Lighthouse is now in effect. Execute Phase 1. Throughout the solar system, humanity's true defensive network began to activate. The quantum web, invisible to conventional sensors, tightened around the hegemony fleet like a net. 43 years of preparation were about to be put to the test. High Marshal Vexthar's response came swiftly, their normally composed features showing the first signs of confusion. Your defiance is noted, humans. However, we detect no significant defensive installations or fleet presence in your system. Submit now, and we will be merciful in our integration protocols. Elena allowed herself a small smile. Send the secondary response. The message that went out was in the hegemony's own language, translated from records found in the Europa archives. The children of Terra send greetings to the hegemony. We know what you are. We know what you have done. And we know exactly how to stop you. As the words were transmitted, Phase 1 of humanity's defense plan began. Throughout the solar system, quantum fields shifted, and the trap began to close around the most powerful military force the galaxy had ever known. The silent defense. The hegemony fleet's response to humanity's defiance was predictable, exactly as the Europa archives had foretold. Their massive ships began to shift into attack formations, energy weapons charging across their armada. Multiple targeting locks detected. Lieutenant Park reported, his hand steady over his console, despite the hundreds of weapon systems now aimed at Earth's apparent defenselessness. They're preparing their standard opening salvo. Commander Rodriguez watched the tactical display with calculated calm. Status of the quantum mirrors. All 732 units are in position. Dr. Patil confirmed, her augmented fingers dancing across holographic controls. Quantum entanglement network is stable. Mirror sites on Mars, Venus, and the Jovian moons are synchronized. The first wave of hegemony plasma torpedoes launched, thousands of devastating projectiles that had broken the defenses of countless civilizations. They streaked across space, their trajectory perfect, their power overwhelming, until they encountered something that, according to conventional physics, shouldn't exist. The torpedoes simply vanished. On the bridge of the hegemony flagship, High Marshal Vexthar's multiple eyes widened in confusion. Impossible, they muttered, watching as a second salvo disappeared just as completely as the first. Launch the fighter squadrons. Full spectrum scan of the target area. Thousands of hegemony fighters poured from their carrier ships, their neural-linked pilots confident in their overwhelming technological superiority. They had never lost a battle in 10,000 years of conquest. Fighter squadrons approaching optimal weapons range, Park announced. Quantum mirror network is tracking all units. Elena nodded. Execute Phase 2. Show them what we've learned. Throughout the solar system, invisible quantum fields shifted. The hegemony fighters suddenly found themselves flying through space that didn't behave according to any physics they understood. Their weapons fired at clearly visible targets, only to have the shots emerge behind their own ships. Navigation systems showed them flying straight ahead, while their actual position curved through impossible angles. They're breaking formation, Park reported, a hint of satisfaction in his voice. Multiple collisions reported across their fighter screen. Their coordination is completely disrupted. The quantum mirrors, humanity's adaptation of principles found in the Europa archives, didn't just deflect attacks, they reshaped local space-time itself. Every shot fired by the hegemony became a potential threat to their own forces, every attempted maneuver a dangerous gamble. Incoming transmission, Dr. Patil announced. The High Marshal is demanding an explanation. Vexthar's image appeared on the main screen, their scales now a dark purple of rage and confusion. What manner of weapons are these? Our sensors detect nothing, yet our attacks are meaningless. Explain yourselves. Elena stood, facing the alien commander with quiet confidence. Your sensors detect nothing because you've never looked for anything like this. The Europa archives showed us exactly what you would bring to this battle. We've spent 43 years preparing specifically for you. Europa archives. Vexthar's voice carried genuine shock. Impossible. We destroyed all monitoring stations in this sector 12,000 years ago. Clearly not thoroughly enough, Elena replied. We found their records, their warnings, and most importantly, their understanding of your technological limitations. You haven't truly innovated in millennia, High Marshal. You haven't needed to, until now. As if to emphasize her words, a squadron of hegemony fighters attempted an attack run on what they thought was Earth's position, only to find themselves emerging near Saturn, their weapons fire harmlessly dispersing into space. You don't even understand what you're seeing, do you? Elena continued. Your sensors, your weapons, your entire approach to warfare is based on principles we deliberately moved beyond. We're not fighting you with superior force, High Marshal. We're fighting you with superior understanding. The hegemony response was predictable. They launched their entire reserve fighter force, nearly 10,000 ships, in a desperate attempt to overwhelm whatever defense system humanity had created. They emerged from their carriers in perfect formation, their neural-linked pilots coordinating with machine precision. Elena watched them approach on the tactical display. Dr. Patel, initiate the quantum cascade. Throughout the solar system, the carefully positioned quantum mirrors began to shift in sequence, creating overlapping fields of distorted spacetime. The massive fighter force found itself caught in a maze where conventional physics no longer applied. Ships that were kilometers apart suddenly occupied the same space, while others found themselves scattered across billions of kilometers in an instant. Fighter screen is completely neutralized, Park reported. 87% of their small craft are disabled or destroyed. No casualties. Their emergency systems are functioning as the archives predicted. Elena nodded in satisfaction. The plan wasn't to destroy the hegemony forces, but to demonstrate the complete futility of their conventional warfare tactics against humanity's defenses. Send the follow-up message. The text that appeared on every hegemony ship's command console was simple. This is only our defensive capability. Would you like to see what our weapons can do? Breaking convention. High Marshal Vexthar paced the command deck of their flagship. Their iridescent scales shifted through shades of deep purple and green, colors of agitation and uncertainty that no hegemony commander had displayed in millennia. The massive view screens showed their fleet's predicament in stark detail. Hundreds of capital ships, the pride of the eternal hegemony, effectively neutralized by an enemy they couldn't even detect. Status report, they demanded. High Marshal, their second-in-command, responded. Conventional scanning methods remain ineffective. Whatever the humans are using, it operates outside our standard detection parameters. Additionally, they hesitated. We're receiving reports of unusual phenomena throughout the fleet. Aboard the TS Artemis, Commander Rodriguez watched the hegemony fleet's confusion with clinical interest. Dr. Patel, status of Phase 3. Quantum infiltrators are fully deployed, Maya reported, her augmented eyes tracking multiple data streams simultaneously. The nanoswarms are in position, and the bridge network is stable. We can begin molecular reconstruction at your command. Elena nodded. The next phase would demonstrate humanity's offensive capabilities, not through destruction, but through transformation. Initialize the protocol. Target their secondary systems first, just as planned. Across the hegemony fleet, crews began reporting strange occurrences. Hull plating spontaneously reformed into different molecular structures. Navigation panels rearranged themselves into incomprehensible patterns. The changes weren't random. They were precise, calculated, and completely unstoppable. High Marshal, an officer called out in panic. The hull integrity of Cruiser Group 7 is compromising, but not in any way we've seen before. The molecular structure is transforming. Vexthar watched in disbelief as sections of their mighty warships began to change, not through destruction or decay, but through precise atomic reconstruction. The humans weren't destroying their fleet. They were rebuilding it at the molecular level. Impossible, Vexthar muttered. No species has ever developed manipulation technology at this scale. The energy requirements alone. That's because you're thinking in terms of brute force. Elena's voice came through their communication system, clear and confident. You've relied on overwhelming power for so long, you've forgotten there are other ways to approach problems. On the Artemis's bridge, Lieutenant Park reported, the hegemony fleet is attempting to adapt their shield frequencies. They're cycling through emergency protocols from their tactical database. Elena allowed herself a small smile, exactly as the archives predicted. Dr. Patel, proceed with the next stage. Let's show them why those protocols won't help. The quantum infiltrators, microscopic machines guided by entangled fields, simply phased through the hegemony's shifting shields as if they didn't exist. They weren't bound by conventional physics. They operated in quantum states that the hegemony's technology couldn't even detect, let alone stop. Your shields are based on deflecting energy and matter. Elena explained the increasingly frustrated hegemony commander. But our infiltrators don't technically exist in either state until they interact with their targets. You can't stop something that doesn't exist in conventional spacetime. Vexthar's response was unprecedented in hegemony military history. All ships abandon standard formation, disperse and establish individual defense patterns, override central command protocols. The massive fleet began to break apart, each ship attempting to find its own solution to an impossible problem. It was the first time in over 10,000 years that a hegemony fleet had deviated from established tactical doctrine. Their learning, Elena noted with satisfaction, faster than the archives suggested they might. Lieutenant Park, track those new formations. Dr. Patel, adjust the quantum field accordingly. The hegemony's attempts at adaptation were impressive but ultimately futile. Each new formation they tried, each defensive measure they attempted, had already been anticipated and countered. The quantum infiltrators continued their work, systematically transforming key systems throughout their fleet. Commander, Maya reported, we're detecting significant changes in their command and control patterns. They're attempting to decentralize their network, moving away from their traditional hierarchy. Elena nodded thoughtfully. They're desperate enough to abandon 10,000 years of military doctrine. That's both impressive and concerning. Send the next message. The transmission that reached every hegemony ship was brief. Your adaptation is noted and respected. However, this conflict can only end one way. We offer you a chance to withdraw and return with diplomats instead of weapons. The choice, as always, remains yours. In response, Vexthar did something no high marshal had done in the history of the hegemony. They asked for time to consider their options. Commander, Park reported with surprise, they're powering down their primary weapons arrays. The High Marshal is requesting a direct communication channel. Elena exchanged glances with her bridge crew. This was a deviation from the predicted responses in the Europa archives. Humanity had planned for the hegemony's arrogance and aggression, but perhaps they had underestimated their capacity for change when faced with complete technological superiority. Very well, Elena responded. Let's hear what they have to say. But keep the quantum field active. After 10,000 years of conquest, they might need more than one lesson in humility. The counter-offensive. The holographic image of High Marshal Vexthar flickered before the bridge crew of the TSS Artemis. Their scales had settled into a muted blue, a color that the Europa archives associated with deep contemplation among their species. You've achieved what no civilization has managed in 10,000 years, Vexthar began, their multiple eyes fixed on Commander Rodriguez. You've forced the hegemony to question its own doctrine. However, their scales rippled with a hint of deep crimson. We cannot simply retreat. The implications for the eternal hegemony would be catastrophic. Elena had expected this response. The archives had been clear about the hegemony's rigid social structure and the importance of maintaining their image of invincibility. Then you leave us no choice but to demonstrate our full capabilities. She nodded to Dr. Patel, who initiated the command sequence they had hoped wouldn't be necessary. Throughout the solar system, quantum fields shifted in complex patterns that had taken decades to perfect. Multiple power signatures detected across their fleet, Lieutenant Park reported. They're activating their planetary siege weapons. Energy readings are off the scale. The hegemony's desperation move was predictable. When faced with an opponent they couldn't defeat conventionally, they would resort to overwhelming force. Their siege cannons could strip the atmosphere from a planet, rendering any victory by their opponent meaningless. They're using exactly the weapon system we predicted, Elena noted calmly. Dr. Patel, initiate Protocol Ouroboros. Maya's augmented fingers danced across her console, activating the most ambitious aspect of humanity's defense plan. Quantum manifolds are aligning. Temporal feedback loops are stable. Ready on your command. The hegemony fleet's siege weapons reached full power, their combined energy output enough to devastate an entire planet. Vexthar's image showed the first signs of confidence returning to their features. Your defenses are impressive, humans, but they cannot stop this level of raw power. Submit now or watch your world burn. Elena stood from her command chair, facing the alien commander with steady resolve. You still don't understand what you're dealing with, do you? We don't stop power, we redirect it. The hegemony fleet fired their siege weapons simultaneously, releasing a torrent of energy that could shatter a world. But instead of reaching Earth, the massive energy beam encountered something unprecedented, a quantum temporal loop that curved through four-dimensional space. The result was spectacular. The hegemony's own weapon fire emerged behind their fleet, catching their rear elements in a devastating cascade of their own power. Dozens of ships vanished in the conflagration before they could even register what had happened. By the Eternal, Vexthar's shock was absolute. What have you done? We created a closed temporal loop in space-time itself, Elena explained. Your own energy discharge was redirected through four-dimensional space to emerge at coordinates of our choosing. You literally shot yourselves. The remaining hegemony ships scrambled to adapt, but their formations were already broken. The quantum infiltrators had been systematically altering their hulls at the molecular level, transforming their once mighty armor into brittle lattices that would shatter under stress. Commander, Park reported, their command and control network is collapsing. We're detecting emergency shutdown sequences across their fleet. Elena nodded. Send the final message. The transmission reached every surviving hegemony vessel. Your fleet is crippled. Your weapons are useless. Your choices are now limited to two options: unconditional surrender, or watch as we systematically dismantle every ship in your fleet at the molecular level. You have 5 minutes to decide. On the tactical display, the remaining hegemony ships hung motionless in space, their proud formations shattered, their invincible weapons proven worse than useless. 10,000 years of unquestioned military supremacy have been broken in less than a day. How? Vexthar's question was barely a whisper. How did you achieve this level of advancement without our knowledge? Because you never looked for it, Elena replied. You were so convinced of your own superiority that you never considered someone might approach problems differently. Every civilization you encountered tried to match your level of brute force. We chose to transcend it instead. The quantum field sensors detected power signatures dropping across the hegemony fleet as weapon systems were systematically deactivated. High Marshal Vexthar, commander of the most powerful military force in known space, did something unprecedented in the history of their civilization. They surrendered. Dr. Patel, Elena ordered, begin power-down sequence for the quantum network, but maintain defensive capabilities. Lieutenant Park, alert Earth Command that Phase 4 is complete. The hegemony fleet is neutralized. As the bridge crew carried out their orders, Elena reflected on the implications of this victory. The hegemony's defeat wouldn't just change the balance of power in the galaxy, it would force them to confront 10,000 years of stagnation. Perhaps that had been the true purpose of the Europa archives all along. A new dawn. 3 months after the hegemony's surrender, Commander Elena Rodriguez stood in the grand chamber of the newly constructed Seoul Diplomatic Center, watching representatives from 30 different species file into the assembly hall. The facility, built using a combination of human quantum architecture and traditional construction methods, symbolized the dramatic shift in galactic politics. Quite a change from shooting at each other, isn't it? Dr. Maya Patel remarked, joining Elena at the observation window. Her augmented eyes tracked the various delegations with interest. Change is what we wanted, Elena replied, watching as the hegemony delegation entered, notably smaller and humbler than their previous diplomatic missions. Though I doubt anyone expected it to happen quite this fast. The defeat of the hegemony fleet had sent shockwaves through known space. When news spread that the supposedly invincible conquerors had been systematically dismantled by a primitive civilization, the carefully maintained structure of galactic politics had crumbled almost overnight. Latest report from the integration teams, Lieutenant Park announced, approaching with a data slate. 17 former hegemony worlds have successfully transitioned to independent governance. Another 32 are requesting human assistance with their liberation process. Elena nodded, taking the slate. The aftermath of their victory had proven almost as challenging as the conflict itself. Dismantling an empire that had stood for 10,000 years required more than just military superiority. It required a fundamental reimagining of galactic society. Commander Rodriguez, a synthesized voice called. Elena turned to find Extol, the appointed representative of the former hegemony worlds, approaching. Their crystalline form caught the light in ways that reminded her of the Europa archives. The High Council has finished reviewing your proposal, Extol continued. The concept of a galactic cooperative is unprecedented. Many are struggling to envision a galaxy without hegemony direction. Change is always difficult, Elena acknowledged. But staying the same is no longer an option. The archives didn't just give us the means to defeat the hegemony. They showed us a better way forward. The Europa archives had contained more than just military intelligence. They held philosophical treatises, cultural analyses, and most importantly, a vision of galactic civilization based on cooperation rather than conquest. The mysterious creators of the archives hadn't just wanted to stop the hegemony. They had wanted to transform them. High Marshal Vexthar requests an audience, Park announced quietly. Elena nodded. The former Supreme Commander of the hegemony forces had undergone perhaps the most dramatic transformation of all. Their defeat had forced them to confront 10 millennia of stagnation, and their response had surprised everyone. Vexthar approached, their scales now a subtle green of renewal. Commander Rodriguez, the Transition Council has completed its analysis of the quantum technology sharing program. I'd wish to thank you. Thank us. Elena raised an eyebrow. For defeating you. For waking us up, Vexthar replied. For 10,000 years, we thought we were advancing civilization by forcing others to conform to our way of life. We never realized that true advancement comes from diversity, from different approaches to solving problems. The assembly hall signal chimed, indicating the start of the session. Representatives from formerly subjugated worlds, independent systems, and even the reformed hegemony took their places. Today, they would vote on the formation of the Galactic Cooperative, a new form of interstellar government based on mutual benefit rather than military might. Dr. Patel, Elena asked, has the quantum network detected any unusual activity in the outlying systems? Nothing significant, Maya replied. Though we're still detecting regular scans of the Sol system from unknown sources, it seems we're not the only ones who were being watched. Elena smiled slightly. The Europa archives had mentioned other observation posts, other caches of knowledge hidden throughout the galaxy. Perhaps humanity's victory had been a test, a demonstration that a species could advance beyond the cycle of conquest and domination. Commander, Park called out, Earth Command is requesting your presence at the podium. It's time for the opening address. Elena straightened her uniform and headed for the chamber entrance. The defeat of the hegemony had been just the beginning. The real challenge, building something better in its place, was only just starting. As she walked to the podium, Elena thought about the mysterious creators of the Europa archives. Had they known how events would unfold? Had they seen in humanity the potential to not just defeat the hegemony, but to help them grow beyond their limitations? The assembly fell silent as she took her place at the podium. Behind her, the combined flags of 100 worlds hung in perfect harmony, a visual representation of the change sweeping through the galaxy. In the end, humanity's greatest victory hadn't been defeating the hegemony. It had been showing them, and the rest of the galaxy, that there was another way. Representatives of the galaxy, Elena began, her voice carrying to every corner of the chamber. Today we begin a new chapter in our shared history, not as conquerors and conquered, not as superior and inferior, but as equals united in the pursuit of knowledge and understanding. The stars await us, not as a battlefield, but as a frontier of cooperation and discovery. As she spoke, Elena couldn't help but wonder if somewhere, In another hidden outpost, the creators of the archives were watching. If they were, she hoped they approved of how humanity had used their gift. After all, sometimes the greatest victory isn't defeating your enemy. It's transforming them into allies.